for the first time in his presidency, Joe Biden made a spontaneous appearance in the White House press briefing room today.
The actual one?
Yes, the actual one. We're not sure if he wandered in there on purpose or by mistake, but there's this report from Politico that he was there for about 15 minutes and journalists audibly gasped when he entered, which is not a great sign. But I'm going to pull this from NPR. He talked about a couple different things. I think it's pretty notable that he said he's worried about, Biden says he's worried about violence around the presidential election. President Joe Biden told reporters on Friday he is confident that the election will be free and fair, but he said he was concerned about potential for violence if former President Donald Trump refuses to accept the will of the voters. Quote, I am confident it will be free and fair. I don't know whether it will be peaceful, Biden said during a surprise appearance at the White House daily briefing. The things that Trump has said and the things that he had said last time out when he didn't like the outcomes of the election were dangerous. This is one of the narratives that I think Democrats go back to a lot. And this story has two components, right? Obviously, there were very serious threats to President Trump. And I'll go back to something former First Lady Melania Trump said, which is that everyone who contributes to political violence by saying things like we need to, do horrible things to keep this man out of office, he's a threat to democracy, contribute to this. And so in some ways, Joe Biden is now back in the DNC camp by saying these things. On the other hand, this guy just showed up for the first time. Is he trying to legacy build?
I thought we were supposed to stop listening to him because he wasn't fit. And now Kamala Harris is kind of, by all outward appearances, doing his job and campaigning. And he's just kind of on a press tour of sorts or walking into the Oval, whatever office.
I don't think he goes
why are
to
we
the Oval
listening
office.
to him now?
It's interesting that the left's always talking about political violence and violence in general. I mean, if you pull the uniform crime statistics from the FBI, it very clearly shows who tends to commit the majority of violent crime in this country. And let's just say it's not MAGA Republicans. It's very clear there in the data who commits the violent crimes. We know how they vote. And so it's just very bold of them to talk about violence when they're often the ones perpetuating.
Maybe that's what he meant.
Almost exclusively, whether it be the riots in all of 2020 and then January 6th, which, is bad, but there was significantly less violence in that one day compared to almost a full year of rioting in hundreds of cities across the country.
And just day-to-day violence in big urban cities like Baltimore, Maryland, Chicago. I mean, you name it. We know who's perpetuating the violent crimes, and it's not MAGA Republicans. So Biden has a lot of nerve saying that.
I mean, the reason, and it speaks to the fact that both times that both of the attempted assassination or the assassination attempt on Trump, people on the left are so quick to be like, oh, it was a Republican, it was a Trump supporter. And it's like, yeah, Trump supporters are trying to kill Trump, which is the most ridiculous thing. But they know that to have that association so clearly on top of all the riots, on top of all the violence that comes from the low grade violence that comes from the Democrats, they have to continue to point the finger because the American people kind of know generally that it actually is Democrats that are consistently stoking the violence. They were calling Donald Trump all sorts of names, and whether or not, there are people that are going to argue and say, stochastic terrorism isn't a thing, and if you what people say doesn't actually impact actions that people take, and I'm sympathetic to that because at the end of the day, you have to put the onus on the person that actually acts. But the idea that spending 4 years or more, or 8 years actually, considering Trump hasn't been in office for the past 4 years, calling Donald Trump Hitler and stuff like that, to think that isn't going to make the absolutely crazy people do crazy things, or at least influence crazy people to do crazy things. I mean, it is the people that do its fault. They're the ones that are responsible. But the whole reason that people say Donald Trump is Hitler is because they want you to think that Donald Trump would do do something as atrocious as Hitler did. It's not like they're saying
it's
it.
an implication of
exactly.
like, this guy's really bad.
It's like it's not just like, oh, he's kind of bad. It's they're associating with one of the worst
one of the worst people in history.
What was the poll they did? It was at CNN and MSNBC. They said they asked people, would it have been a better thing if Trump's assassination was successful? And it was a very high number of people who said, yes, it would have been better for the country. Like, that's the mindset of these people. So whether they're the person, on the hill or not, or hiding in the bushes,
people that said that?
it was really, I think it's in the 30s.
I've heard 27%. I've also listened to a podcast where a pollster was like, well, that you have to take out these people and like try to walk it back down. Because I think it is even shocking to mainstream researchers and journalists. Like, even though they themselves do not like Trump, I think the idea that people are open to such a tragic thing being positive is not the direction anyone wants the country to go, or at least the majority of
It's
people
like
don't.
words have meanings and they have effect. And if you
Right.
keep repeating them over and over again, you're going to convince people that something truly evil is good.
It is also interesting to me that Biden is specifically bringing up this narrative of Trump denying the results of the last election or whatever, and this being an imminent threat to this year's election. This was something that came up a lot after J.D. Vance just really annihilated the debate earlier this week, in part because it was one of the only moments where he was in a tough position. They asked him about Trump's comments and things like that. And he, I thought, did a totally okay job, but had to sort of say, like, we're going to move on peacefully, kind of move past this point. And it was something that corporate media definitely latched onto and was like, he couldn't answer. He didn't disavow what Trump said. This is happening all again. Where is Mike Pence when we need him? Because they loved Mike Pence when he was in office, I'm sure. Is this one of these final issues that Democrats are bringing up during our final weeks before the election because they think it invokes fear and that's enough to motivate voters to stay away from?
I think it's all they have.
Really?
Literally all they have. Because what else is there?
Abortion, I guess. That's the other thing they always bring up.
Oh, so murder and murder. Awesome.
It would be nice if the moderators asked Kamala Harris or Waltz, especially Waltz, being in Minnesota and Minneapolis, about violence, since it was Democrats that were torching cities and torching small businesses and being extremely violent across the country, but not a word about violence despite all of that and despite Waltz being there as the governor of Minnesota, but they're asking Vance about it. So again, it's just really weird how the media and the moderators in this case can shape the narrative by painting Trump and Vance as these kind of nefarious villains that are in charge of all of this political violence, when again, if you were to just look at the data and just turn on your TV, you would see who is torching inner cities and shooting people every day.
Did we ever get to the bottom of whether Tim Walz is friends with school shooters or not?
He said he was.
Clarify that?
I mean, he said he was.
He said
He was pro-trans.
that
so.
he misspoke and he meant he was friends with the victims or people who have been impacted by school
Oh.
shootings. And then he referenced David Hogg. So I don't know. It was a weird answer. JD Walz is a weird character. They say vice presidents don't win the election, but in this case, I really think that Walz is creating more obstacles for Kamala Harris, and JD Vance, especially given this week's performance, is really strengthening the ticket.
Well, he's touring with Fetterman now instead of Harris, right? So he's kind of in timeout.
Oh no!
Is he really touring with Fetterman?
Oh,
Is he still vertical, Fetterman?
John Fetterman?
he made a recovery.
He's kind of hilarious.
He actually made a recovery. I think the stroke actually put things back in order.
Do you guys expect to see Biden return to the campaign trail at all?
Is there going to be ice cream and small children?
What would his part be?
Disavow. He did do.
Disavow.
Look, I want to keep my job and I want to keep this show on the air. The thing is, he did do one official. They did like a joint. They did a joint appearance as president and vice president right after she got moved onto the top of the ticket. And then a couple weeks later, after the DNC, he did one campaign event where he spoke before her. And so if you were
he
Joe
opened for her.
Biden, right, he opened for her. The sitting president of the United States opened for the vice president and a different political candidate. To me, this screams disrespect. I know Joe Biden might not be all together, but like there has to be a point where he just formally breaks up with Harris, yes?
I would hope.
So this presser he did it's very catty. If you listen to what he said, everything that I did, Harris did with me. We are a team. We're following the same playbook.
That's great.
It's amazing. He really does tie her to his administration. She is trying so hard. I mean, this was true in her debate with Trump, right? She would say, we did so much because she can't say Biden's name, but she can't take solo credit. But then also is like, I am clearly not Joe Biden. I mean, I'm glad that he honestly
What
is
you should
getting
do
mad.
is say, like, I created all these problems. I'm the only one who knows how to solve them.
He woke up from a nap one day and found out he wasn't running for office.
I know. Can you imagine? So we think that that Biden will just stay in the White House and say nothing, or are we getting a bunch of off-the-cuff remarks? Where
He has to stay in the White House so he can pardon his son. That's the only reason he's still in there.
No, I mean, well, as far as the campaign goes, they're actually sending him on trips now to keep him away from the campaign. I just heard about it today. I'm actually looking for it right now, but he's got a couple trips coming up. And it's because they don't want him to be on the campaign trail because he's absolutely incapable of, forming coherent sentences.
And now he hates Harris. Like he's a liability for the campaign in so many ways.
If you need any more proof that the media doesn't do their job, it's the fact that he can go up there and literally make no sense for 25 minutes, incapable of, stringing 10 words together, and the media doesn't say anything. They'll actually replay some of his clips that make no sense, and they will not comment on it or say, oh, Biden wasn't making much sense there. They'll actually sum up what he was trying to say for him and regurgitate it to us. David Muir's a professional because I watch ABC Nightly News at 5:30 with him all the time, and they just skip right over it. And so I don't think there's a more glaring example of them not doing their job than how they ignore Biden's utter incompetence and the fact that he's clearly senile and clearly dealing with some kind of dementia or Alzheimer's. I mean, it's terrible. It's embarrassing.
So do you think the DNC is just bad at their job? My hypothesis is here, did they just think they could slip Joe Biden by? They weren't aware of his cognitive decline in 2020 when they tapped him to be their nominee? Or have they always known and they are just, kind of like, we can make it work, it's fine? Like, what is the DNC's role here?
I remember back then, even 4 years ago, I remember being aware that Biden, something was cognitively not right, but it was not this bad. It has definitely gotten progressively worse as each year has gone by, but I think he was the only tenable candidate that they guessed correctly could take on Trump and beat him, and so they said, you know what, there's issues here, but he's the only tenable candidate we have, and so they just went with it. So yes, I think they're on notice. I think they're aware of it. Did they know he was going to decline this much during his presidency? I don't know, but it's egregious that they then tried to run him again in 2024. They're definitely aware of it then, but they did the right thing by having the right thing, I'd put in quotation marks, by having Kamala step in for him. But yeah, everyone was aware of it in 2020, but especially now in 2024, it's just so glaringly obvious. I mean, as you said, he literally cannot talk for more than 5 seconds. And
that's why he only did a 15-minute appearance in the briefing room today. And I think you're right. Right in this sense, meaning most strategic move to serve their interests. And I think this is one of the things that undecided voters or Democrat or voters that would be independent, maybe lean Democrat, noticed. I've heard interviews with voters saying, we didn't choose her. I wish that we had been involved in the process. She did just get selected by, quote, them. And
they wasn't selected ever.
They stepped on their own toes because they only chose her as vice president because she fit identity politics, right? Is she black? She Indian? I don't know. Depends on the day, I guess. But she fit a narrative. She fit the ticket, right? They were not going to overstep her either. There was a bunch of debate on who was going to take over Joe's spot because that was what's going to happen. Be like, oh, it's going to be Hillary. She'll step up. It's going to be, they cannot step past her because they put themselves in the trick box, right? You can't pass over a black woman. Now they're stuck with her.
Yeah, and I think in some ways she is.
It's kind of
she
poetic.
doesn't have the same problems as Joe Biden, but she is not better. She is a challenge too.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.